All
Clarity,
right.
before we get started, sorry, Gloria. Darren, I
No,
know
go ahead.
that being on the committee, we had said 20 minutes followed by 5 minutes of questions. However, 20 minutes really is what we're speaking to, and there will not be 5 minutes after that. So I think we messed up a little bit in terms of our committee work and the scheduling. So I just wanted to put that out.
So you're not going to take questions? That's okay. It's up to you.
Well, I think we'll take questions, but I don't think there's time if we go 20 minutes only when it should be 20 plus 5. I'm not trying to be difficult. We can take questions maybe at the end then. I just think we won't get through it all, but we'll see what we do.
Let's try. Keep going.
Heather, can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to our presentation. Heather and I work for City University in Canada. Heather is the Canadian Director of the MEd in Leadership Programs and an academic committee member for the PDGIA. I'm a principal faculty member at City University in Canada, and I teach courses in research, leadership, and leadership in the MEd program. So during our short time that we have here together, I just need to advance my screen. This is what we have planned for you, and we'll start with an introduction to the study. So our study is a qualitative study that focused on senior leaders in K-12 school districts in Alberta. Heather and I were curious about what they were experiencing as they were leading through the global pandemic. Both Heather and I were senior leaders in K-12 school districts, and so we wanted to talk directly with leaders to learn more about the experience.
We also just wanted to make you aware that although most people here are in British Columbia, a few from Ontario, and I saw in the initial session, there was from Saskatchewan and such, we are both in Alberta. And the maps here just again show you Alberta if you're a little less familiar with it. And the picture on the right-hand side is for the College of Alberta School Superintendents. So you can see that, and we'll talk about this in terms of our participants, that they came from this organization, so rural and urban areas. So our problem initially was looking at COVID-19 like everyone else, and that COVID-19 is having a severe impact on K-12 schools and school districts. So we looked at how we could see what was really going on for people there. And so the research questions we put out were, what are the COVID-19 pandemic challenges faced by senior authority leaders in one Canadian province? We're talking here senior K-12 leaders in school districts. So that would be superintendents, assistant superintendents, directors, that kind of thing. And the one Canadian province, no surprise, is Alberta. Secondly, we looked at what are the COVID-19 pandemic lessons learned by senior authority leaders in one Canadian province, Alberta, and what are the recommendations then going on through the pandemic and another critical moment or a crisis situation. We will spend most of our time looking at lessons learned. That's what we really wanted to share with you with a brief outline of the recommendations.
So for this study, we focused on scholarly literature about leadership. But as we conducted our literature review, we found that most definitions and descriptions about leadership implied that a leader had a known pathway or a direction that was going to be undertaken for a leader to guide others towards. It made us think about leaders having a sense of knowing about moving others to this new or this better state. But as we got deeper into the literature, we became interested in adaptive leadership, which is a model developed by Ronald Heifetz. It seemed to be a better fit for understanding leadership, particularly during a pandemic, when there isn't a known direction or a pathway, and sometimes directions could change within minutes when you're leading during a pandemic. Heifetz explained that typically people associate leadership with an ability to demonstrate power, influence, and authority. Heifetz explained that power, influence, and authority were tools that a leader could utilize, but they did not define a leader. Often power, influence, and authority was given to a leader by other people with the expectation that the leader would provide service, actions, or solution to situations within their context. He explained that adaptive leadership is not about meeting or exceeding your authorizer's expectations. It's about challenging some of those expectations, finding a way to disappoint people without pushing them completely over the edge. And it requires managing the resistance that you will probably trigger. Heifetz explained that adaptive leaders spend time on the balcony observing the dance floor. Being on the balcony allowed the leader the opportunity to observe from a different perspective and provided the ability to notice things that were not visible while you may have been immersed on the dance floor. So, for example, while on the dance floor, you might think that everyone is having a good time and seem to be dancing. But when you look at it from the balcony, you might notice that people are not dancing maybe so close to the band or the speakers because the music is too loud. Or you might have noticed that indeed there really isn't a lot of people that are dancing. Heifetz says that being on the balcony allows the leader time to consider whether problems were technical or adaptive in nature. This chart identifies technical and adaptive challenges and how they are typically solved. Technical problems have solutions that are known. People generally know what to do, or they know where to find the expertise to solve the problem. Where on the other hand, with adaptive challenges, the problem is not quite understood and it requires learning. The solution also requires learning, and it requires learning for all of the stakeholders. A common tendency was to try and solve adaptive challenges with technical solutions.
Should unmute myself. So just before we go back into the adaptive and technical challenges, just a review then of our research design is a qualitative study. We were looking at an explanatory case study approach to examine a phenomena, an event, a bounded system, obviously the province of Alberta and cast members, school superintendents, and we were looking at an in-depth analysis of that. We were approved in December 2019 by the IRB for City University of Seattle. City University in Canada is where we work, but of course we're affiliated with City University of Seattle. And so we did get the approval at that particular time. We went to the College of Alberta School Superintendents, to the Executive Director, to get permission to contact people, or should he wish to do that. And people were so excited about joining the interview process, the semi-structured interviews in terms of being part of the research. So we set up semi-structured interviews with 24 members of the College of Alberta School Superintendents. Again, superintendents, assistant superintendents, associate superintendents, depending on the terminology that you're used to. Semi-structured interviews with these 24 people. Then we had everything recorded, transcribed, and we used Navivo for a more in-depth analysis. Finally coming up then to the thematic data analysis and back again then into the technical and adaptive challenge piece. So as Gloria mentioned, the challenge that we were looking at was to look at what were the technical challenges and what was the adaptive challenge. So to analyze the challenges first faced during the pandemic, the key themes that emerged from the semi-structured interviews were first categorized into technical challenges and adaptive challenges. Just a referral then again, technical challenges can range from simple to complex, and while important, they have solutions that are typically known by internal or external sources. Through a qualitative approach, an authoritative approach, new structures or processes may be applied to resolve the challenge. Adaptive challenges are often complex, multifaceted, difficult to identify, and need shared responsibility to solve. When we looked at this, the technical challenges that came through very clearly in terms of the themes were outlined as online teaching and learning, technological limitations, new procedures and equipment, and the one adaptive challenge, the one that is there for everyone that was never reached to a solution for, was the idea of shifting mindsets about learning, because we've been in this K-12 environment, the way things work, for so many years. So the researchers were then able to discover details about lessons learned and recommendations that came from these findings and these technical and adaptive challenges.
The first lesson learned that we'll talk about is about the value of trust. Many of the participants talked about the value of trust, not only with those that they work with, but trust in themselves and trust in the system. They talked about developing authentic, trusting relationships. Some identified trust with approachability, and you can see the quote on the slide talks about wanting to have that type of open door policy so that people would feel comfortable to come and talk to them about what they were experiencing. Another participant said, trust is not earned, it's given. They explained that you can't go into a pandemic waiting for trust to be proven or earned. You have to give trust up front. And this is not to say that pre-pandemic senior K-12 school district leaders did not have trust. They did, but the participants reflected on how this value and trust played a significant role in providing a deeper level of confidence in the decisions that were being made, often as part of a team effort. Oh, you're muted, Heather.
I just realized that, yeah. Sorry, I should pay more attention to that. So the second lesson learned was with regard to the power of team. And all of the participants in the study talked about the importance of teamwork, not only within their school district, but also with other school districts and community partners such as the health authority and the government. So on the local and school district level, it was seen as critical to establish a lifeline. Being connected and establishing a broad support system, because this became a critical lifeline for senior leaders. One participant said, I think ultimately, because of the power of the team, that we are so much stronger together. Our capacity to overcome challenges has significantly strengthened a result of sharing and collaborating. Secondly, in addition to the local level, senior leaders reflected on the support of colleagues within their organization. So we talked about CAST, and some of the participants talked about pre-pandemic, how they were often working in a world of isolation, but during the pandemic, most participants relied on their CAST colleagues, superintendent colleagues for information sharing, idea formulating, and the people that they could count on for support. You will note that the quote there on the slide says, I think another good lesson is that even though we want to be standalone, separate divisions, when things like this happen, we need to support each other and going on from there. The final piece here in terms of the power of team, besides the local as well as the CAS membership, was with this piece around connecting with health authority and with the government. So even at a larger provincial government level, while many participants longed for more advanced notice of provincial government communications that impacted them, for the most part, school district leaders much appreciated that they were not alone in dealing with the pandemic.
The study could have been about communication. This was mentioned so many times from all of the participants that Heather and I put it not only as a lesson learned, but also as a recommendation. All of the participants talked about communication needing to be consistent and clear. This was expected, necessary, and vital. Communication needed to be ongoing, and the participants said they learned not to be hesitant to over-communicate. Multiple modes of communication needed to be used to ensure that the message was delivered to a wide audience. Some of the participants felt that they were now a better communicator due to the critical nature of consistent and clear communication during the pandemic. Some of the participants from larger school districts felt that in today's world with social media, a communications officer position was critical to manage the communications.
So many of the stories about the pandemic on social media and in the news talked about the signs of the pandemic and the quantitative data associated with the pandemic, such as case counts, hospitalization numbers, death counts, number of vaccinations administered. So through the interviews and talking with people, participants recognized that many people seem to be handling the stress of the pandemic, yet they also understood that people were struggling. Participants stressed the importance of remembering the impact of pandemic on people. And as one participant described, we really approached the pandemic from a position of compassion and understanding. That was the mindset. So we need that compassion and understanding. Many of the participants also described the need for a calm voice of reason, and they could help them manage people or help people manage through the pandemic. As one participant said, and it's here on the slide for you, I felt a lot of responsibility and a lot of anxiety around helping teachers navigate this, because not only were they needing to prepare in a week, which wasn't a long time to do, there's also panic within the community. And so I tried to be that calm voice that helps people get through and rationalize this. And in addition to this, many of the participants expressed concern about the mental health and well-being of people in the school district, including families. They talked about anxiety levels that were so high and hard to explain. Emotions were high. And as senior leaders tried to deal with all of these pieces for so many others, or help them manage their tears, their fear, their anxiety, and their frustration.
All right, we're getting the 5-minute warning, Heather. So the fifth lesson and the last lesson learned is about powerful life lessons. It's impossible to lead through a global pandemic for months that has stretched over years without it having an impact on individuals. The participants talked about being in this high state of alert for weeks and then eventually into months. They recognized the tremendous responsibility that they had to lead a school district, but with the addition of the global pandemic, it heightened the impact of the decisions that they were making. And they were very aware that their decisions could impact all members of their school district community. This deep sense of knowing oneself, forgiving oneself, and ensuring self-care were powerful life lessons that the participants identified. Knowing oneself refers to having a deep understanding of your own beliefs and values. It's knowing why you're in education and what keeps you in education. One participant explained knowing oneself is remaining committed to your core values and the values that you bring to the organization. Others talked about resiliency, and the quote that you see up on the screen is about resiliency, knowing that it's important. And this person goes back to what we anchor to and have consistently anchored to. It's going back to your core values and to your beliefs. Along with having a deep understanding of knowing oneself, many of the participants talked about forgiving oneself and remembering to being kind to oneself. They talked about being realistic about what they can control and recognizing what they can't.
And so very quickly, we'll just go over the recommendations. It's very odd for me, just to let you guys know, I have no idea if you can see me because I can only see Gloria. I couldn't see Darren's 5-minute warning or anything. So it's a bit off-putting for me just to share with you. The recommendations that came out of this, then the recommendations really were in many ways just a reiteration of the findings in terms of lessons learned. So the first one, communicate clearly. We talked about that. They said over and over again how important communication is. To show empathy and be an advocate for others. Clearly, we talked about that as well, really being an advocate for others. And to take time for self-reflection. And they were so happy, so many of them, to talk with us because then they could really reflect out loud with us, but really do the self-reflection. To demonstrate flexibility should this happen again. Invite others into the solutions to build on those trusting relationships and to be courageous. Well, none of these are unusual or odd or anything. In this time of pandemic, these are the pieces that they really reflected on. And finally, I would just take us through to our conclusion. Again, we looked at this through the lens of adaptive leadership. We looked at the technical challenges which were identified and where similar solutions were presented by all of the participants. Remember again, back to those 3 technical challenges. And the one adaptive challenge, solutions were still not clearly determined, even though it came up with all the participants and was the one adaptive challenge. Lessons learned were shared and recommendations evolved.
Wow,
So that
was
brings us to
excellent.
to the end of our presentation. Just one quick other fact is that Heather and I are looking for a journal that we could submit our study to for publishing. And so if you have any suggestions about journals that we might look at, we'd sure appreciate that. And you have our email addresses there if you want to contact us. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you. Sorry you couldn't see my warning, but that was perfect. You have actually finished on time, and I thought those recommendations would solve half the world's problems. Quite frankly, I think that's very timely and probably very interesting for all of us, because if we did those things on a regular basis, we'd probably be more adaptive and pivotal with or without COVID. So I really appreciate that. One comment is the first question you asked, what is leadership? I wrote a book, and that's the title of my book, What is Leadership? And I answered the question. So
okay, well, we'll check it out.
At some point in time it's out there, and somebody answered that question. But any questions for Gloria and Heather? We have 5 minutes.
So Samantha's asking, Gloria, if we can go back to the slide on recommendations.
Yep.
All right.
And thank you, Greg, for helping me figure out why I couldn't see anyone. I was afraid to do anything to the screen in case I messed it up.
We can see you too. You look great.
No problem.
Okay, Samantha, over to you. What is it you wanted to see or hear? Oh, you wanted to see them. Is there a question? I didn't see a question. You've got the recommendations. Is there a question on the recommendations or no?
I guess I do have a question on it. So we have the demands of the leadership on one hand, and then, things that we know we need to do, like demonstrate empathy. How do we get everyone on board with this need to, all of these recommendations, but still sort of follow the, say, quality guidelines? I know that's a huge can of worms, but any just as easy, well, yeah, simple suggestions you could make off the tops of your heads.
Well, I think that there's lots of things in there in your question and ways that we can thread things together. To me, one of the most important things is that we keep in mind all of these things as we thread them through each of the things that happen in a school district, happen in any place, whether it's a university or whatever. So I'm not sure that that is in any way answering your questions, but what are those things when we create strategic plans that look at all of these things as we move forward with the pandemic still going on and into other times as well? We know we need to communicate. How do we do that? How do we keep that in our strategic plan for each and every activity we do? How do we show empathy and be an advocate for others? To me, there's those threads that we cannot let loose and let go because they are so important. The whole idea of self-reflection, that self-awareness and taking time for oneself, we don't do that. As educators, we work 24/7, whether it's in K-12 or in universities. So where are we reminding ourselves we need to do that? How do we keep that as a thread, whether it's within our program, within our system, all of those things? So I know that that's pretty far-reaching and maybe umbrella term. I think we can do it if we take time to ensure that we do it and work together. So I'm not sure, Gloria, if you want to add to that.
No, I think that's a really great answer. Thanks, Heather.
Heather and Gloria, we may look at our own journals. So keep this topic hot, and maybe it's something we look at. I'm not sure your time frame, but we might be able to move fairly quickly after we get through this conference and do a debrief. So
okay, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that'd be great, Darren. And I guess I would just add to this that this is kind of step one. We were able to receive funding through our Western Canada Research Fund through the university. Yep. That doesn't mean we're done with this. There are so many other avenues in terms of what do we do in crisis situations and whatever. So I won't go on about that. But yeah, I think we could really build on it.